It's never as simple as just saying I'm choosing this side or that side. You have to speak up, because what I will say is that whether it's Democrats, Republicans, progressives, or conservatives, there are things that a Christian cannot go along with that both of them are doing right now. And if you're not willing to stand up and say that, and you just vote however they tell you to vote, then you've given over something that you shouldn't have. And I would say that your civic witness, that your public witness, is not as faithful as it should be.
Amen.
Welcome to my Boulevard.
Right. What is up, everybody? We are here with a brother that I have enjoyed and loved and followed for many different reasons. He's actually a fellow Atlantan. I don't know, Justin, if you are actually from Atlanta or not, but a fellow Atlantan, current Atlantan. I don't know how long it takes for you before you even claim Atlanta. I've been here for about 15 years, so I think I can say I'm Atlantan. I don't want to be any other place. I love the city and all that. So anyway, that's not what we're talking about. But we are here, and his name is Justin Giboney, and he's with the AND campaign. And so, Justin, what's up, man? How you doing?
And unto it, man. Thanks for having me, Dhati. Glad to be here. And I've been in Atlanta for almost 20 years.
20 years. So are you an Atlantan? Would you say that?
I feel like it.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I feel like you can say it. And I feel like you can say it with confidence because, that's really what it's about. Like, if you have been in a place for 20 years, that's another whole time in the podcast. I won't spend all of our time there, but I think it's an important discussion, because we're talking about like living local, being local. And that's a part of that is us taking responsibility of where we live, work, and worship. And, if you're here for the first time, this is My Boulevard podcast. And that's really our heartbeat, our desire, that we just really feel like if Christians would make an impact locally, then we as the body of Christ will make an impact globally. And I think that the local has been one of the things that we've lost in so many things. And so today I got my good friend, Justin Giboney. He is on today, and he's going to help us talk about like local politics, local things. I mean, he's way much more than this politics, but he is the founder and leader of the AND campaign. And, and so I wanted him to share a little bit about the AND campaign and just the history of it and kind of what it's about. And so that's where we're going to be. And then we'll get into some local things. And so let's gotta go and jump in. So Justin, share a little bit about kind of the history, who you are, the AND campaign, why you started it. And just kind of let's kick us off that way.
Yeah, no problem. So for me, I'm an ordained minister. I'm a political strategist, and I'm the co-founder of the AND campaign. I founded the AND campaign along with your brother, Sho, also Angel Maldonado, a while back, and really for us, the AND campaign, just to, be specific, is a Christian civic organization.
Okay.
And what that Christian civic organization is trying to do is we're trying to raise civic literacy, for one, to allow Christians to engage more effectively. But also, and more importantly, is we want Christians to be less partisan, less ideological, so that they can actually engage more faithfully based on biblical principles. And it's not that party and ideology are just terrible, but they are bad masters, and they should never be the masters of our social action or our civic engagement. And so that's what that's generally what we're trying to do. But the reason that we thought the AND campaign was important, and we all come from different spaces. Obviously, Sho is an artist. Angel Maldonado is a pastor. I had been in politics for years, been a political strategist for years. But I think we all saw that there was this kind of false choice that came along with politics. Whereas you were either completely on the side of everything the left said and you cared about justice and you just went along with whatever the cultural left said, or you were completely on the right and you just went along with whatever the right said because you cared about morality. So there was a separation between justice Christians and morality Christians, and you kind of had to choose which one that you were, right? But when we look in the Bible, we didn't see that separation. When we looked in the gospel and we saw Jesus interact with people, you saw love and truth. You saw compassion and conviction. You saw a commitment to justice and moral order. And we began to believe that those things have to go together. Like, right, if you have somebody who's justice oriented, but they separated their justice from the moral understandings of the Bible, then there's something wrong with that, right? And vice versa. So the AND campaign literally means compassion and conviction, love and truth, justice and moral order, meaning we're not going to choose between those, even though society tries to force us to. And unfortunately, some people in church have chosen between those. We actually are going to bring both because we think that's the more faithful way to go about Christian engagement.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I want to come back to you about kind of that, because what people have oftentimes in my circles have argued, where then it becomes, because you can't be fully in one or the other, the whole idea of the lesser of two evils. And so which one I'm going to take on the lesser of two evils and kind of like that. And then that, there's a whole thing. So I want to come back to that specifically kind of when it comes to kind of the local national conversation. But before that, you started off, and I love the way you started off. You start off says, I am an ordained minister. You also talk about Angel, which I know, and he is a pastor. And we're trying to get Show back into the church, but we're still praying for him. But I know, like, one of the things that you are passionate about is just simply the local church, and this the importance of the local church. And you do a lot of sermons, you preach at a lot of churches, you do. And so, like, because a lot of times when you talk about civic engagement, you don't have to have the local church as a part of that, but you choose to do a lot through and with the local church. Is there a reason why? Is that intentional? Share a little bit about that.
I mean, that's just part of our makeup from the beginning. There would be no AND campaign without the local church. In fact, if we are ever fully separated from the local church, then I don't think there should be, I think we should probably dissolve. The local church is kind of the foundation of what we do. From the beginning, I went to meet with people like yourself, local pastors, to talk about my vision for a civic organization, because I understood that although, it doesn't necessarily need to be a part of the church technically, that any organization that is faith-based needs to be very much connected to the church, very much connected to faith leaders. I mean, we were at Blueprint when we brought all those folks together, whether it was Charlie Dates and Lisa Fields early. I mean, this is when most of us just met each other to go over the standard, our moral standard for what it meant to be a Christian in the civic space. We wanted to make sure that, our base wasn't politics, our base wasn't culture, that our base was actually the church, and that we were and stayed very close to pastors, because we wanted to make sure that we were equipping pastors, that we were actually providing a felt need for them when it came to civic issues. Because I think a lot of times your local pastor is put in a really tough position when it comes to politics, because people expect too much, and then they also expect to kind of be for the pastor to kind of go along with what they believe politically, and I don't think that's fair. So we try to equip, and a major part of that was making sure that every turn we made, every theological position we took, we were running it past the local church and folks and leaders in the local church that we trusted.
So one of the things that's interesting, because especially since, let's just take the last 4 years. I mean, I know we can go back a lot farther than that, but just since the time of COVID was a major time that they'll be writing about and talking about for histories. It just felt like post-COVID, like pastors have become less and less willing to engage in political world, because especially as polarizing and more polarizing, and it's specifically in the Black church, it feels like, and you're more of the civic engagement kind of historian and would know more about, but it feels like the church has been silenced in a lot of ways, unlike any other time in our history, right? Where in a lot of ways that we used to be the place to host things and do things of that nature. And first I would ask, do you feel like that is, like, anecdotally, I mean, I don't know if you have any stats or whatever, anecdotally, do you feel like that is true? And then secondarily, do you feel like the church is losing ground, because of whether we are or not doing and how we are currently engaging in politics or
so for a part of church, especially I would say that the Black church or just churches with a lot of I think minorities in general, I think there has been an effort to silence the church in a way. I think there are groups of secular activists who just don't like the church. And so when it came to Black Lives Matter and it came to the other things, they were like, you know what, we want to do this without you. Even though if you look in the past with the civil rights movement and even before that, the church actually has done it the best, right? When you talk about social action in America, nobody has done social action in America better than the church has. And I mean that in one way through actually getting things done, right?
Yeah.
But also doing it in a way that didn't have a negative kind of net effect on the rest of the country and the system. So whereas I think a lot of folks should be looking to us, I think some people were trying to move away from the church when it came to a lot of social action. That said, I can't blame it on the secular activist. I think many churches stopped interacting in the way that they had as well. So I think the church kind of backed away from the role that it had played in those spaces, and other people, kind of filled the vacuum. So there's if we want to place blame, there's blame to go around. Either way, this is a place that I don't think the church should concede. Now, should it be overly partisan or overly ideological? No. But I don't think we can concede that space. And it seems like we've been pushed to do it. And to some extent, we've done it ourselves. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you kind of hit both. It's just like, do you feel like we've lost ground in light of that because of, because it always seems like you had your civic organizations, but you also had the church. You had, where there was agreement and even disagreement and things, but they were able to part, and we weren't kind of silencing one another or whatever. And it seems like now it just seems like less and less kind of the church is more silent. And do you feel like, however we are engaging based upon what you just said, like, how do you feel like our footing is as church leaders speaking to kind of the public right now?
I think the church has lost some ground. Now, I don't agree that I still think the church is doing more than most institutions are. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, even folks that don't believe in Jesus are really like the church. It's odd. They always have high expectations for the church, though, when it comes to different spaces. Right. So there's a very high expectation of us. I don't know that we've always met that. And I think we have given up some ground. And then, to be honest, in certain ways, the church has lost credibility as an institution because of scandals and things of that nature as well. So it's not just other people saying, I don't like you just because. It's saying, I don't trust you because you said you're one thing and you actually ended up being another. So all those things play into us losing some ground, but I wouldn't take that too far. The church still does a lot. I mean, as you know, whether it's feeding folks, whether it's, when people call and need something, a lot of people know that they can go to the church, and that hasn't changed. Maybe the extent of it has, but that presence is still there to some extent.
So before we get into the local and national side of things and really kind of focusing on the local, the AND campaign, right, even as you explained it, right, is trying to walk that line, right, just walk that line. And so tell me how hard is it not to just kind of give in to the lesser of two evils? Because literally, this past election, if I could just kind of, or not a past election, the current candidates right now, and I'm literally on a weekend, like Resurrection Sunday, which we just celebrated, a little bit ago. On one end, I'm seeing President Trump, the candidate, talking about he's selling Bibles, and on the other end, I'm seeing, Biden on Good Friday talking about celebrating Transgender Day on Easter and at the same time. And it just seems like that. And so then you kind of comes like, man, my options don't feel like I'm very, like I have many good options. And so I just I don't want to just, what people say, don't want to just throw away my vote. So I got to take the lesser of two evils. So let me kind of decide, no matter how you land, like how does the AND campaign, when we think about, because this is obviously a national kind of situation, like how do you advise people in those types of scenarios or situations?
So this is a very good question, and it's important that people understand this. In some instances, you will have, as we do now, 2 or 3, even if they're more than just the main 2, but primarily 2 not so great choices. I think most Americans feel like our 2 choices for president right now aren't very good. Now, if you want to vote third party or whatever, that's your choice. The AND campaign doesn't tell you how to vote. We want to give you a biblical framework and let you work that out for yourself, whether it's with your church or whatever, to think through that yourself. It's not on us to tell you who to vote for. There will be cases where you have to say, okay, in this vote, I'm going to have to choose between two very imperfect candidates, and I just need to sit, write down my priorities, whether they be poverty, healthcare, whatever, and just sit, abortion, whatever your priorities are. I would list probably 5 to 10 of them, and just see where the candidates fit on that, right? And sometimes you have to make a choice where you're saying, I don't really like any of these candidates, but this one fits me a little better, all right? Sometimes that's the choice you have to make. Sometimes and I don't even think it's wrong for Christians who say, no, I do feel more, I connect better with one party or the other. That's your choice. I know a lot of Christians who don't connect with either, but if you feel like you connect with one over the other, that's fine too. What you can't do, and this is really what the AND campaign is saying, what you can't do is choose a side and basically hand your public witness to that side. So you know what? I think Republicans are better than Democrats. Therefore, whatever Republicans say, I'm going along with them because this is in this good versus evil, fight. That side's evil. This side is more good. Therefore, I do whatever they tell me to do. That's what I think is wrong. I think Christians have to be able to, you cannot outsource your public witness. You can't hand it over to somebody else and let them make a decision. So, I'm a Democrat because of poverty, and that means I'm also going to let the Democrats tell me exactly where I stand on gender identity, and I'm going to let the Democrats tell me exactly where I stand on abortion. That's wrong, right? If there's something you connect with them on, that's okay, and you can make your decision. You cannot hand over your public witness to them, and that's been something that the AND campaign has took a lot of heat over. But it's something that we really stand on. It's never as easy as just choosing a side. Anybody who tells you in politics just choose a side, I think they're oversimplifying how this works. I mean, even if you look at go ahead.
No. What I was going to say is it's like, and I even think that is something that as even Black pastors, minority pastors have struggled with, who historically we would be considered just as conservative, even more conservative biblically, than our white evangelical counterparts. But we have voted more, from a Democrat, right? And so there's been like some of that tension that we've had to play where we may vote a certain way and think, I guess, how true is it? And again, I don't know. I'm just kind of just talking about what I'm hearing, right? Yeah. What I'm hearing. And I don't claim to be a political expert or a civic engagement, but what I'm hearing is that a lot of minorities are like, because of what we've experienced over these last 4 years, is like the Republicans or President Trump is gaining a lot of the minority vote because of just the outright kind of like giving over to, like you said, like some of the things that is taking place. I guess I don't even know. I mean, again, I don't know if I have a question to that. I guess my question is, how true do you know of that to be? Is that just rhetoric? Because I know it's hard to decipher kind of what's going on. Like, what do you see in like a lot of your engagement out there around kind of that?
Yeah, I think the general consensus is there has been some movement from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, or, as of late. The Democratic Party being that they were getting, sometimes over 80% of the African American vote, will probably get a little bit less of that this time around. Whether that's right or wrong, I let people, people decide that for themselves. I think what we have to realize is wherever you find yourself, you have to make sure that you're being as faithful as you can be. And if you end up on the left or on the right, that you're willing to challenge them on the things you disagree with them on. Because the problem that we have is, okay, I like how Democrats do social justice better, therefore I'm gonna go along with them on everything else. No. Or I like how Republicans, I like their stance on pro-life issues more. I'm gonna do, everything else that they tell me to do when it comes to justice and everything. We can't do that. It's never as simple as just saying I'm choosing this side or that side. You have to speak up, because what I will say is that whether it's Democrats, Republicans, progressives or conservatives, there are things that a Christian cannot go along with that both of them are doing right now. And if you're not willing to stand up and say that, and you just vote however they tell you to vote, then, you know, you've given over something that you shouldn't have. And I would say that your civic witness, that your public witness is not as faithful as it should be.
Amen. Amen. And so when you talk about your public witness, that kind of gets into what we're talking about, like this is my boulevard, like local politics, because we've been talking a lot about the kind of the national platform and who you're going to vote for, like, you know, on the national scale. But oftentimes, I mean, it impacts us, but we don't feel that locally. And so talk about the difference between national and local, right? Like when we, especially as we think about this political season and the kind of what we're in, and how we can let our witness be more felt locally, more than just simply talking about this kind of the national platform.
Yeah, most of what you're going to hear people talking about right now is the national election, right? The federal election for president. That's what everybody's going to be talking about. And I think that's unfortunate. Now, the federal election is very important. It's consequential. But I think it's painted almost as if that's the only thing that matters right now. And that, you know, if you win, everything's all good. And if you lose, everything's all bad. I think that's the wrong way to think about it. There used to be a saying that all politics are local, which I think is right, Because to your point, we have more of an impact on things that happen that are local. We're actually seeing the people and having conversations with the people that are impacted by what we do. But now it pretty much seems like all politics are national. And everybody just talks about national politics. But if folks who are listening to this take one thing from what I have to say, it's this: your church, Blueprint, whatever church you're at, can have a greater impact on the people in your community than either of the two people who will likely be the president come November of this year. Think about that. Yeah. Your church will have a greater impact on the folks in your community, if you apply yourself, than the folks who are going to become the president. And what that should say to you is, although this presidential race is important, it is not ultimate. And I still have agency in my church, and what we do still matters a whole lot. And I think that perspective is something a lot of people are missing, man. You hear a lot of folks who are just pulling their hair out. Everything's over. And let me tell you, this is going to be consequential. Don't just say, well, I don't have to care about national politics. That's not what Justin Giboney's saying. But it's not everything. And whether you win or lose, the work that you can do locally is going to be more impactful around to those around you. That's something to hold on to. And I think it would help a lot of folks to have that perspective, you know, moving forward for the rest of this year and beyond.
Yeah.
Obviously.
No, I think that is spot on. You know, earlier I said that if we as believers would take responsibility locally, that we as a body will have more of an impact globally. And I think part of it is just kind of going back in the old school like days. They talk about like the parish, you know, just being a part of the local parish, and that kind of goes back with your statement about just all politics is local. And I think that's the thing. And so to give us a few examples. So what does it look like for us to participate or engage in local politics, and so that we can have that kind of impact on our neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something as simple as going to your school board meetings and making sure, you know, looking to see what is actually on the curriculum, right? Making sure that things are age appropriate, that, you know, that folks aren't trying to sneak books in there that kids shouldn't see. And that really does happen, right? But guess what? If you live in an urban space, the Democrats and progressives aren't going to tell you that's happening. Only if you're engaged would you actually know that it can happen, right? And it's not just something that a whole bunch of conservatives in a whole different state or whatever are saying. It does happen. So that's one way. Going to your city council, and maybe, you know, there's a program that they need to support. Maybe there's a piece of legislation that's actually going to hurt some of the folks who live around you that you need to push back against. Those things can have a massive impact on the folks around you. But unless you're aware, unless you've taken the time to be informed and you're organized enough to engage, you just kind of miss an opportunity that's right in front of you. So a lot of times, because we focus on national politics, we feel disempowered. But the truth is, you actually do have a lot of power, and your voice does matter, especially on a local level. We just see that as not see it as if it's not a big deal, when the fact is that it is a huge deal, and it's something that we need to that we need to steward well. Is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, and so in that, I oftentimes say that a problem is not a real problem until it's your problem, and something becomes your problem through relationship and through proximity. Right. And so when we think about kind of those things, and it seems like, we lack relationships with those people who live around us in our neighborhoods, right? Are unengaged in the schools or that are taking place in our places. And so especially with the urban context specific, let's just focus on that for a minute, being so transient. Right, like they're so transient. People come and go and move, and that are different than like you. There's not an expectation that my neighbors will be the same 5 years from now. There's not even necessarily an expectation that I may not even be here for 5. And so sometimes we kind of live like renters in spaces, right? And we're really transient, and instead of kind of like taking ownership of it, like. What are some ways that you've kind of thought about like overcoming that, or helping leaders, pastors, pastoral leadership, helping their members or people to overcome that, especially kind of in urban environments that is dealing with so much transition, gentrification, and those types of things?
No, it's tough, man. I mean, because everybody's moving, everybody's going, climbing that ladder, going to the next step, and so they may be there next year or not. But while you are in place, even as a pastor, whatever, there usually are people somewhere around that area who've been there for a long time, right? Who aren't, going to leave with the next, trend or whatever. And connecting with them and their organizations, connecting with the churches that have been there for a long time, as much as you can, is really important. To see, a lot of people don't even take the time to really hear from somebody in the community about what this neighborhood used to look like, what it meant, what it means to them. What's the history? Who used to do this, who used to do that? Those are some of the best conversations you can have, and it makes you take a sense of ownership. One of the biggest problems with how transient we are is that nobody takes ownership of where they are, because they know they're going to be gone, in a year or so. We've got to take, as churches, the churches have to take ownership, and you don't have to save the world. You may not even go to a city council meeting or to a school board meeting, but you can work with the people locally to see what they need. And they say, hey, we've got something that's really important. You look into it and it makes sense. And you do have to make sure that you look into what people are saying, because some of the things people have you do would be wrong, and the church has to be careful on what they get into. But once you've done your due diligence, there are a lot of ways that you can help, just through, even if it's 10 people that you're bringing to the table or whatever, that can be helpful to a lot of different initiatives.
No, that's really good. And again, I know you're going to probably shy away from this one, but like what I love about you is that you're a practitioner. You're not one to just talk about things and not do things. Many people probably don't know, and I don't know how much, at least my audience, is that you have been a part of kind of this world, like especially what's happening on the west side of Atlanta, the transitions and the gentrification, and trying to kind of preserve the historic nature of it, the rich history and all of that, but also dealing with gentrification and all of those things taking place. And you have sat on and been a part of like initiatives and things. Can you just share a few things of like lessons learned from kind of going through that, going through that in the west side of Atlanta, and some of the neighborhood stuff that has had, and how you've specifically engaged?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I've kind of been on both sides of the conversation. So for about 8 years, I worked for the mayor of Atlanta. So I worked in the law office, but also worked in at the development authority. And so when the city, and what I see from that too is, we talk about both sides. When people are trying to do what's right, it's not really both sides. So when I was in the city, there were some people who maybe weren't in it for the right reason, but most of the folks I worked with were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to make sure that some of these neighborhoods got better, because what folks don't understand is obviously when new people come into an area and they completely change it and they ignore the people who were there before, that's terrible. But the truth of the matter is, and I'll give you the example of even when I moved in my neighborhood, some of these neighborhoods were dying. And when me and my wife look at the house that we're in now, because we're in Grove Park, a lady down the street came to us and said, please move in. We need more young professional people like y'all for these kids to see, right? So even when we talk about gentrification, it's a nuanced conversation, because a lot of the areas, if nobody new came in, then there wouldn't be nobody, there wouldn't be nobody there. So I think we can be kind of simplistic when we talk about that. But any of the things that I participated in, whether it was the new stadium, where you had people from the community that got to help build the new stadium. And I was part of that conversation, got to bring the community group together and come up with a community benefits package. Did everything go perfectly? No. But I can honestly say that the folks that I was working with in the community and inside the mayor's office, most of them were from Atlanta and wanted this thing to go and wanted things to go really well. And I think a lot did. Some things not perfect. But one of the major things that I learned in community work was that you got to be in the community to understand things. And I think one thing that happens for us is we come from a bigger place, or we come from especially academia, and we think we know more than we do. Yeah. When the truth is, sometimes you got to learn from people who may not even have a whole bunch of degrees, but they've been around and they see how things work and they have a lot to teach you. So be willing to learn from people who you may not think has something to teach you, but you, in many cases, be surprised.
Yeah, man, I think that is good. All right, man, before I let you go, this has been really rich, really good, lots of good nuggets to create. I do have two sets of questions. One is, have you ever seen The Price is Right? Not Price is Right, Family Feud. You've seen Family Feud, right? And in the Family Feud, at the end, they have like the speed round. Right, he's like, all the families, like they go away and then they come back and they just answer like questions, and it's like rapid response questions, and they put like a minute on the clock and say, all right, go, and then like give it that. All right, so that's what I want to do with this last kind of segment, is just ask like you questions, and it's all centered around the church's engagement in local work. Right, the church's engagement in local work. So everything's around that, and I'm asking you 4 questions. And I'm gonna give you those 4 questions real quick so that you can say it, and then I want you to give me the speed answers. All right. So I'm gonna ask you what's working, what's broken, what's missing, and what's confusing. All right, those are the questions that I'm gonna ask, and I want you. So we're gonna put the minute on the clock, and we are going to go. All right, Justin, what's working?
I think the way that churches are giving food to the community, they're still doing a very good job with that. So their food programs, outreach.
All right. What's broken?
Relationship.
All right. What's missing?
You could say relationship there too, but I'll say understanding, a connection with the community and understanding there.
Okay. And what's confusing?
I think folks are confused on what the purpose of the church is in those spaces, how to apply the gospel to what we do outside the church. That's
good. Hey, you did probably the best that I've ever had someone do it. And so you auto-corrected yourself, because I was about to give you you can't say the same answer for 2 things. And so you did that thing. That was pretty good, man. I really appreciate you, and you're just intelligent, brother, and I appreciate you, man. And so, man, again, this is Justin Giboney. Justin, like, how can people find you? How can people like get connected? What's coming up? What's going on with the AND campaign right now?
So if you're on social media, you can connect with us at AND campaign on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. If you're a pastor and you really want some more information on this, we have 10 disciplines that we created with the AND campaign to help pastors and leaders kind of understand how to keep people constructive in this space. A lot of pastors, might get caught up in trying to cover one side or the other side. I think more so for pastors, it's about challenging folks to make sure that they're faithful in what they and how they choose to vote or whatever. And so we're here to help with that. If you go to our website, we have 10 disciplines and actually a video series that we did at Blueprint to help folks understand how to get people through this election cycle in a constructive and faithful way. And I just want to say, man, I've always appreciated you, Dhati. You've been close to the AND campaign, always been helpful, always opened the door, heard us out, and been supportive. So we greatly appreciate you.
Man, I definitely will take that link and we're going to put it in the bio. And we're also going to take that link and when we send out the newsletter forward so that people can kind of find you in that way. Man, that is so helpful. I love that. The 10 disciplines, right, that we all need, especially as we enter into this season. So, well, appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for, again, joining us for another episode of This Is My Boulevard. I'm here with Justin Giboney, founder, co-founder, leader of the AND campaign, and he is someone that is sharp and like definitely go follow him in everything that he's doing. He's one of the people that I would say like I'm 100% confident in sending anybody to, and there's not too many people that I am that confident in doing that to. So he is a brother that is that's willing to say, follow me as I follow Christ. And I know that he has that conviction to truly follow Christ. So thank you, Justin. I appreciate you, man. And until next time.